Sand and steel screamed together as the desert wind drove grit into every fold of cloth. Horses reared, men shouted in a tongue sharpened by iron and purpose. Amr ibn Alaz stood at the edge of a shallow encampment, cloak whipping, eyes fixed on the dark line of fortifications coiling along the Nile's eastern bank like a serpent awaiting a hand. Behind him, the tents of his army ragged, hungry, resolute, belched smoke. Ahead, the fortress of Babylon watched the narrow causeway, every parapet a promise of blood. He had not come for glory, but for a nation, for grain, for trade, for the pulse of the Mediterranean that had fed empires. The Byzantines had turned Egypt into a bulwark, its garrisons disciplined, its rivers a maze that favored the defender. Yet Amr moved always like the desert itself, patient, listening to whispers carried on the wind, ready to strike where the earth weakened. Scouts returned with salted tidings, patrols thin at dawn, a merchant route unguarded by noon. He felt the calculus of survival as plainly as the sand under his sandals. The plan he spoke next was not wild bravery, but carved logic, a pivot along a narrow corridor, a siege that would split supply lines, a calf born of containment rather than slaughter. He ordered the tents closer to the water, a forward base where men could wash blood from swords and mend bent spears. He would turn that ragged cluster into a city, if need be, a citadel of the new rule upon the Nile. Night fell and brought another war, the quiet grind of mines. Amr conferred with commanders, mapping sorties by lantern glow, tracing Byzantine patrols with a finger. Each decision held the fate of thousands and the course of history. He balanced speed against caution, the hunger for Alexandria against the need to secure a foothold. The desert had taught him that conquest was not a single blaze, but a slow, cold choke. As dawn broke, a horn cracked the air. Cavalry spilled like fire from hidden folds. A probing force dashed toward the fortress, then fell back as planned. The Serpent stirred, revealed a flank. Amr smiled with the thin smile of a strategist who had read the land. The first lines of a long campaign were being written in the sand, a patient coil tightening around a fortified heart. From that encampment, a new city would rise, and with it the first firm foot of the Islamic State on Egyptian soil. The desert whispered. He answered with resolve. EVNTSCOVID, crossing into Egypt, siege of Babylon fortress, foundation of Fustat. In the heart of Mecca, amidst the swirling sands and bustling trade routes that defined the Quraysh, Amr ibn Alaz honed the skills that would shape empires. Born into the noble Banu Sam clan, he was a merchant's son who learned the languages of profit and power on the caravan trails. His keen intellect and persuasive speech made him a valuable asset to his tribe. When the message of Islam began to disrupt the ancient pagan order, Amr initially stood with the Qurayshi elite, defending the traditions of his fathers against the new faith. The first true test of his diplomatic prowess came with the migration of Muslims to Abyssinia. Al-Tabari meticulously documents how the Quraysh, alarmed by this exodus, chose Amr and Abdullah ibn Abi Rabia for a critical mission. Laden with precious gifts, they sailed to the court of the Negus, the Christian king. Amr's strategy was deliberate. He sought to portray the Muslims as dissidents who rejected the lineage of their own people, hoping to sway the Negus with political reasoning. Before the throne, he presented his case with calculated elegance, but the Negus, after listening to the recitation of the Quran from the Muslim refugees, saw through the deception. The king's refusal was a stinging defeat for the Quraysh, and for Amr, it was a confrontation with a faith that could not be bargained away. This encounter lingered in Amr's mind as the years unfolded. Ibn al-Athir recounts the changing landscape after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, when the momentum steadily shifted towards Medina. Amr, a man accustomed to assessing risk and reward, observed the resilience of the Muslim community and the sagacity of the Prophet. The old tribal loyalties began to fracture under the weight of truth. In 8 amidst personal turmoil and high-stakes decision-making, he made his choice. Alongside Khalid ibn al-Walid, he traveled to Medina and uttered the declaration of faith. Ibn Kathir emphasizes the Prophet's warm reception, immediately entrusting Amr with responsibilities. The merchant's son had transformed. His acute understanding of men and strategy was now irrevocably pledged to the service of Islam. EVNTSCOVID, delegation to Abyssinia, conversion to Islam. In the crucible of early Islam, the sands of Arabia bore witness to the rise of a military prodigy, Amr ibn al-As. His reputation, already formidable, was about to be tested in the most unforgiving of arenas, the Battle of Dihat al-Salasil. The year was 6 and the fledgling Muslim community faced a formidable foe in the form of the Byzantine-allied Arab tribe, the Banu Lihiyan. Amr ibn al-As, now a seasoned commander, was entrusted by the Prophet Muhammad to lead the Muslim forces. The stakes were high, the outcome uncertain. The desert winds whispered tales of an impending clash that would echo through the annals of history. Amr ibn al-As, ever the strategist, understood the importance of unity. He recognized that the scattered tribes of Arabia could not stand alone against the mighty Byzantine Empire. With the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, a fragile peace was forged between the Muslims and their Quraysh adversaries. This pact, though initially contentious, laid the groundwork for future alliances. Amr ibn al-As saw the potential in this newfound unity, and he worked tirelessly to strengthen the bonds between the tribes. His diplomatic prowess was as sharp as his sword, and his vision extended far beyond the immediate conflict. As the Muslim community grew in strength and numbers, so too did the ambitions of its leaders. The once scattered tribes now stood united under the banner of Islam, their eyes turned towards the vast lands beyond the Arabian Peninsula. Amr ibn al-As, with his unparalleled strategic acumen, was at the forefront of this expansion. He understood that the key to victory lay not just in military might, but in the ability to adapt and innovate. His tactics on the battlefield were as fluid as the desert sands, and his enemies often found themselves outmaneuvered and outthought. The stage was set for Amr ibn al-As to leave an indelible mark on the sands of time. EVNTSCOVID, Battle of Dihat al-Salasil, Treaty of Hudaybiyah, expansion of Muslim territory. The city of Mecca hummed with the noise of pilgrims and merchants, but for Amr ibn al-As, the clamor had begun to ring hollow. He stood before the idols of the Kaaba 300 and 60 silent gods carved from stone and wood, and felt nothing. These deities his fathers had worshipped, these mute figures Quraysh had defended with blood and treasure, offered no answers to the questions burning in his mind. The defeat at Badr had been a wound. The catastrophe at Uhud, though technically a Qurayshi victory, had revealed something more troubling. The Muslims fought with a conviction that transcended mere tribal loyalty. They died with words of paradise on their lips. What did Quraysh die for? Pride, commerce, gods who could neither hear nor speak. Amr watched the pilgrims circumambulate the Kaaba, their rituals ancient and unquestioned. But he had traveled too far, seen too much. In Abyssinia, he had witnessed the Christians' unshakable faith in their unseen God. In Yemen, he had encountered Jews who carried their scripture like a fortress in their hearts. And now, in the Arabian Peninsula itself, A new creed was spreading like wildfire through the desert, a message of one God, uncompromising and absolute. The year was approaching the 6th after the Hijrah. The Treaty of Hudaybiyah had just been signed, and though Quraysh celebrated it as a triumph forcing Muhammad to turn back from Mecca without performing pilgrimage, Amr sensed something his compatriots missed. The Muslims had gained legitimacy. They were no longer rebels to be crushed, but a recognized power to be negotiated with. He thought of Khalid ibn al-Walid, the sword of Quraysh, and detected in his friend's eyes the same unspoken doubt. They were warriors without a cause worth dying for, generals defending gods they no longer believed in. The idols stared back at him with empty eyes, and in their silence, Amr ibn Alaz heard the first whispers of his destiny. The old world was crumbling, and he stood at the threshold of a choice that would define not just his life, but the fate of empires yet unborn. EVNTSCOVID. Treaty of Hudaybiyah aftermath, Amr's growing doubt in idol worship, internal crisis among Qurayshi leadership. The whispers of trade routes, once faint, now echoed with the urgency of necessity. Amr ibn Alaz, his gaze sharp, his mind a crucible of strategy, understood that the lifeblood of a burgeoning nation flowed not only from conquest, but from commerce. The Byzantine Empire, a colossal power that had long dictated the flow of goods and wealth, stood as a formidable obstacle. Yet Amr was not one to be deterred by established might. He saw in the vast expanse of the Levant, and beyond, opportunities ripe for the taking. His focus turned to the strategic port cities, gateways to the Mediterranean, and the lucrative trade networks that crisscrossed its waters. The capture of Alexandria, a jewel of the ancient world, was not merely a military triumph, but a calculated move to wrest control of vital arteries of commerce. This was a battle for more than land. It was a battle for economic destiny. Amr recognized that denying these riches to rivals and channeling them towards his own people would forge a foundation of prosperity, securing the future against any foe. He understood the delicate balance of power, how economic strength could bolster military might, and how influence could be woven through shared prosperity. His campaigns were not solely etched in the annals of war, but also in the expansion of trade and the establishment of secure pathways for merchants. The spoils of war were significant, but the long-term gains from controlling vital trade routes promised a far more enduring legacy. EVNTSCOVID. Control of trade routes, economic strategy, Alexandria's economic importance. When the dust of the prophet's passing had settled, the Ummah stood at a crossroads. Under Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, the decision was grave: to secure the western frontier and bring the blessings and burdens of governance to the rich lands of Egypt. To lead that venture, Umar turned to a man forged in the crucible of desert commerce and Qurayshi politics, a commander whose tongue was as sharp as his sword. Amr ibn Alaz accepted the charge, not as conquest for vanity, but as a strategic mission to secure resources, protect the weak, and extend the community forged in Medina. He marched with a small, disciplined force into the Nile's realm, confronting not only Byzantine garrisons, but the complexity of a settled civilization, cities, canals, and a people long accustomed to imperial rule. The first great test came at the fortress on the Nile, Babylon. The citadel rose as a bulwark of stone and supply. Its control meant command of the river approaches and the lifeline to Alexandria. Amr's skill was not merely martial, it was logistical and political. He established lines of supply, read the terrain of loyalties, and used the river itself to isolate and pressure the defenders. The siege was tight, the hours long, and the stakes immense. Failure would expose the Syrian front and imperil the newborn Rashidun polity. When Babylon fell, it was not only a military victory, but the opening of Egypt to a new order. Ammar acted with pragmatic clemency. He offered terms to the inhabitants, safeguarded the churches and customs, and made clear that the policy of the Islamic State was rule through justice and obligations, not wanton plunder. From the ruins of conflict, he founded a new center, Al-Fustat, a garrison camp that would become the seed of Egypt's new capital. There, soldiers became settlers, markets rose by the Nile, and administration took form. The conquest continued toward Alexandria. Negotiations and sieges tested resolve, but the pattern held. Disciplined force combined with shrewd diplomacy, protection of the populace, and incorporation of local structures. Ammar's campaign in Egypt revealed the quintessential skill of leadership in an age of flux, to marry swift military action with statesmanship. His choices would shape not only the map of the caliphate, but the lives of millions who would now live under a different sky. The sands had shifted. A new city rose beside the river, and with it the possibilities of an expanding, disciplined community bound by law and faith. EVNTSCOVEID, conquest of Egypt, capture of the Babylon fortress, founding of Al-Fustat.